This weekend we're celebrating so many parts of our history, and I've been reflecting on those specific actions and ministries that we want to lift up for the 10 years we're looking at this weekend. And one of them, I thought, the Unitarian Society in Germantown so many times in history has been good at preparing itself as a church and the country for what is to come. And I think the fact that Reverend Bill Gardiner was voted on in the spring of 1980 and then came to serve this church, bringing his family and Peggy in 80, is such a great preparation because in the fall of 80, Ronald Reagan was elected President of the United States. So 4 months after Bill Gardiner begins his ministry at USG, Ronald Reagan is inaugurated as President of the United States, and we know we entered a very intense 8-year period where progressive and liberal values were under siege in our country and in the world. And Bill was a perfect leader to help make a steady, strong ship of a church to be in coalition with others, to work on issues that matter vitally to human rights around the world and goodness for all people. It was a tough time.
You were 12 years old then, right? Yeah.
I was, no.
He's younger.
No, yes, I was. I was 12 years old. With Bill's call, that's true.
Oh boy.
Yes,
It's always been a tough crowd.
But I was aware because I was at Third Unitarian in Chicago on the west side. USG has had so many important eras. The congregation was founded in 1865, critical time in America. People coming together to see how we go next into our future as a nation and as a part of the country here. And I just want to name, in our 150 exploration, we've really been looking at those different eras, which include when they grew out of their building in Germantown and came over here to 6511 Lincoln Drive in the 1920s and brought Reverend Sullivan, who was such a big name speaker. It was just tons of people coming in here. He died, sadly, and a bit prematurely, and he couldn't be replaced. So they developed this amazing next era of the ecumenical pulpit. And that's also important to think about this weekend as we have Bill and Peggy with us, because Bill was the minister, in my estimation, looking back, and we'll hear your opinions, to steady the ship into creating a new model, a new, more standard model of parish ministry for Unitarian Universalists, with a very fine minister, we're hearing, doing excellent work, visiting homes after the death of a loved one, with great heart and reliability, preaching with excellence, never being complacent about his own skills. I hear constantly, and encouraged about my own development of preaching, knowing that you continue to work hard and develop in your preaching, both in content and in effective communicating style and method, and social justice work, which we'll hear. And Unitarian Universalists, this is a great story right here at this address of before the curve, with the leadership of Bill and others saying, you can love who you want to love. And we're going to do union ceremonies, including after a very tender process that we'll hear about in our sanctuary. Before a lot of people got it or understood, but people stuck together and worked with it. And it's a big deal. I want to just mention, I was, one of the thrills of my life is I was invited to be the minister here in 2002. And as I was in that process, I will always remember, Bill and I found a way to connect on the phone, and he let me know that his father had died very recently. It was a very hard time for the Gardiner family. And Bill and I did not know each other. And I was so touched by the grace and love he showed in spending time with me to tell me his thoughts and experiences and how great a church this is. And he advised me as a senior minister to a rookie, essentially, saying, one of the biggest things I tell you is to be self-differentiated. And I've always held that in my heart. do your work, study, reflect, talk, listen, and try and figure out what you think about an issue, and articulate clearly what you think about something, whether it's administrative or social justice or theological, and do just as much work to make a caring, respectful environment for everyone else to do their own thinking and reflection.
Now we're talking.
And feel safe that they can say what they believe. And this is what Bill taught me before I got voted on to be here. And I would say it's possibly the key to my ministry here, that I always just go back to that. And whenever a minister is coming into a new church and they say, do you have any thoughts? It's one of the things I say the most to other ministers going to other churches. So thank you for that. And I think if we look back, that's what Bill did here. He lived that out, that self-differentiated leadership of creating space and doing his own work. I am so grateful and proud of our 150 years and who we are today. We're a strong, feminist, multiracial, GLBT proud church, and Bill and Peggy were primary, groundbreaking pioneers for us and with us in that, and we're so grateful you're with us this weekend. Thank you. Wow.
I gotta say this. Listen, the whole time I was here, I used to say to people, because I was doing my own thing, you go to work with your husband. You ever hear me say that? And now, you know, and just because I'm here, I get all this credit, but I didn't do a whole lot. I was doing my thing.
Yes, you did. So fascinating. What happened? So, we're going to start this little gig out. And someone's telling me it's not 25 years, it's 27 years since we've been here. So we're going to cover 27 years in 10 minutes. Tell me a little bit about our family and some of the work stuff that we've done since we've left here and in retirement.
Okay, well, you start. I'm starting with our daughter Anne, who was in the youth group here. Okay? So Anne morphed through, and she's over 50. She and her husband teach at a private school called Taylor Academy, which is down near Cape Cod. And Anne teaches history. She teaches contemporary ethics. She is the chaplain for the school, and she runs a couple of kind of community involvement, social justice programs. So you just hear it.
And our other daughter is Paula. You may remember her. She actually went through junior high and high school here.
Girls High, right?
Girls High School.
She's a Girls High graduate. Okay, so she's now married and has 2 daughters, and she's a physician working at the Boston University Medical Center in Boston. And that's where the hospital serves the poor communities in our city. And Anne has a very unique, Paula has a very unique role in terms of focusing on alternative complementary medicine and also being a researcher in evaluating how people use that stuff. So she's a very interesting niche as a medical professional right now.
I guess the other thing about the girls is they struggle with the same kinds of struggles that we did, or I did, trying to balance family, trying to work in institutions where they keep bumping into, you have to do this or that. It hasn't changed, and I just made a little note to myself. So I remember I have a pin that I got sometime when we were here with 59 cents to the dollar. Yes. Now it's 79 cents to the dollar. Yes, and so I remember our struggles, and I see the same thing in our daughters. So, okay.
So how about our parents?
I'll talk, yes. So our intention was to go from here to New England to be closer to our parents. And we became quite involved in their caregiving. My mother became an Alzheimer's patient, and so oftentimes to talk to people, we went through that. You can't hear it. So my mother was an Alzheimer's patient. She was down in Connecticut, and so I would drive back and forth to help take care of her. My dad, on the other hand, lived till he was almost 102. Right. And my sister and I tried to keep him in his home. Crazy thing to try to do. But we tried to do that. And so I just kept driving up and down the highway. So we kind of called ourselves a club sandwich family. Because we had kids, grandkids, and our parents. But that's what happened to my folks.
And my two parents, it was wonderful to go back because going back we had 10 years of reconnection with our family, which was incredibly healing and just so powerful for us. Sadly, my father took his life early in 2000. And there's a lot I could say about that, but I'll just kind of leave it there. As to how complicated that was and the aftermath that I'm still feeling from that. And then, being the only sibling in the area, I had primary responsibility for the care of my mother, which actually turned out to be an incredibly powerful thing in my life because of this incredible connection that we had. And the paradox of the end of her days coming and the intensity of our love coming together at the same time. It's pretty powerful. So we've had 4 different unique stories with the passing of our parents. And the coming of a new generation, our 3 grandchildren. And you see them in the pictures there. Our oldest granddaughter is named Rowan. She's now a junior in high school. And just this last week went out and started on her college tours. So you can see that just coming right around the corner. Bright, talented, musical, amazing young woman. What's particularly powerful to me is that she's very involved in the First Parish of Arlington, where we belong. She's very active in the youth group. And by the way, they've got 70 kids in their youth group. It's a real amazing thing. But she's also a worship associate, and she's on the social justice committee. Some people think she's on the track.
You going to talk about Ella?
After you get a chance to talk about it.
Okay, so Ann and JJ have Jackson, and Jackson is, I don't know, 15 years old, and Jackson plays second base, and he's the first one to hit the ball in the lineup. You know, I don't know anything about
That was close enough.
I don't know about baseball, but
Lead-off hitter.
it's lead-off hitter, that's the term. He's doing some kind of a wilderness training program this summer, so he's very excited about that. And I don't know about you, but I find it very difficult to communicate with him. I ask him lots of questions. Yeah, great. So kind of what I've learned to do is to bake cookies, and then I go with him to these movies.
Oh boy.
Captain America, or whatever it is that he loves. And he'll tell me, well, this is too scary for you, but not. So that's kind of the relationship we have with Jackson. I'm kind of waiting for him to grow up, and so we can talk a little bit.
So our youngest granddaughter is named Ella. She's 13 years old. She's into fashion and makeup and cell phones and Instagram and Spotify and all this other stuff, you know, and we're learning from her. She's teaching the grandparents how to use all this stuff. So weekend before last, we had the classmates of Peggy's came up the lady Bobcats, people that she graduated with 50 years ago, they were at the house. And I went over, the family lives in Lexington, very close to us. And Ella and I prepared a brunch for the 5 ladies from Bates. I made ratatouille, she made a delicious frittata and a fruit salad, and everybody was just thrilled with the way it all came out. So it was just a wonderful, 3 or 4 hours being with her, building the team, the cooking team together. So that's a little bit about our family. Peg, I think you had a few jobs that you went through.
I've been known to, cycle through. So from here, remember I was working for Digital Equipment Corporation. And when I went up to Boston, I continued. And I worked for Digital, or DEC. And DEC had a great rise, and then DEC had a great fall. So I went up with Digital and down with Digital. But Digital gave me a wonderful severance package, which I parlayed into tuition in Tufts. I went to the Boston School of Occupational Therapy and became an occupational therapist. And I loved that. I loved that. And so I spent about 10 years as an occupational therapist, most of which was in home care. So I just felt like I was running my own little business, and it was great. One of the things I discovered when I was in home care is that if I would teach my patients yoga, they would be compliant. If I gave them exercises, they wouldn't do them. So I became very interested in yoga and became I'm a registered yoga teacher. And so when I began to teach, began to do fewer hours of OT and more hours of yoga, then I kind of morphed into, in the last 7 years, I was teaching seniors yoga. So my goal in yoga is to bring yoga to people who would never get it under any circumstances. So that's been kind of fun. And I'm back in school again, learning more about yoga from a different point of view. I don't know if you've ever heard the words Iyengar or Ashtanga.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm doing. And kind of retooling again, and we'll see where this takes us.
Well, a big part of that is she also got her husband doing yoga. So, after I left here, I had an opportunity to go to Boston to work at the Unitarian Universalist headquarters, and there was a department called Faith in Action, which was involved in doing justice stuff. And there were 2 main programs I ran. One was called the Social Justice Empowerment Program. And that was working with local congregations on how they could develop effective social justice programs. And I could say a lot of the things that I learned here about how to bring social justice into the congregation got applied. And those lessons went out across the country. So the other thing is, while I was there was a major initiative around racism and anti-racism called the Journey Toward Wholeness. And along with Mel Hoover, I was the key program facilitator of that. So I got very immersed in that, and I'm still deeply involved in anti-racism organizing at a national level. But that, I'll say a little bit about that later. So a lot of program stuff, a lot of time on the road. In the period of my being on national staff there, I was probably the 3rd most traveled person going around the country working with groups. So it's a big country, went to a lot of places, hundreds of congregations, hundreds of sermons, hundreds of workshops, etc., etc., etc. And it was its own way of life. The beauty of it was working with youth social activists in their local communities who were doing amazing stuff. And the challenge of it was this, the movie about the guy floating around in the airplane.
Martian? No.
Clooney?
Up in the air.
Lost in translation.
Lost in translation.
Up in the air.
Up in the air.
Up in the air.
Up in the air. Kind of floating out there somewhere. You don't know where you are, waiting for the plane to come in. Anyhow, retirement has come upon us.
You're not.
Peggy's teaching about retirement.
I taught a course, right? You know, learn a little, then just teach it. So we have in our area the OSHA program. We have it here at the school. What's it? It's seniors teaching seniors. So I got together with a friend of mine, and we decided to teach a course for seniors called Living the Balanced Life.
Nice.
And we were able, because Boston is so rich in resources, you know, we thought we'd talk about, for seniors, exercise, nutrition, and maybe meditation or stress management. So, you know, we were able to, like, go to MIT, and they have an aging lab, and Tufts University has a nutrition school, so we got all these people to come and talk to us. And I'll net out the three things that we learned about wellness. Nutrition is called Eat Your Greens. That's what they all say. You know, it's like the fall colors is what you eat. The second thing is everything that this family physician who specializes or spends a lot of time with seniors said, she says it's all 3 syllables. It's all 3 syllables, eyes, ears, whatever. It's 3 syllables called exercise. So eat your greens and exercise, and then be active in a community. And those are the 3 things that came out from all of the speakers and from all of the research that we did. And it's just really interesting as we've talked to people here, there's a wonderful sense of community amongst you. You know, people are saying to me, well, I walk, I do my yoga, I, you know, count my steps. It's huge. And then, you know, people are concerned about what they're eating and nutrition. And like you all, one of the other things I think that I'm concerned with, or we're concerned with, is how do you make those decisions to change the style of life that you're living so that you can live a safe and happy lifestyle. So for me, it's been very rewarding to talk to people to see how they're dealing with these issues of age. The last thing I want to talk about is I do belong to a group up in Boston called Mothers Out Front, and we are mothers and grandmothers who have come together to work on issues of climate change. So we're trying to make a difference in the politics of the decisions that are being made, and that's been very rewarding.
So we wanted to give this little homily on aging to mostly say, these are the things we're trying to do too, you know, and it's kind of there's a certain intentionality about aging, isn't there, that you have to go through to make it through, as it were. So let's see if anybody has any questions about what we've shared so far about our 27 years. Yes?
I just wondered if you wanted to make any reflections on your time here. You've had 27 years to think about it.
Maybe he just wanted to put it behind.
We're actually coming up into that. We're going to be doing some reflecting on next week. I'm just saying in terms of our own personal 27. Okay, so I think, you know, where I'd like to start is what's all important to you about the decade? What do you remember? What do you think was significant that happened? And not necessarily about my ministry here, but what happened in the community during that decade? What's important for you?
Yeah, for me, the men's group, I guess that was like maybe 88, 87, that you gave 3 sermons on men's issues.
I did?
You did? For a whole month or something like that. And then you asked any men that would like to start a program of men's studies. And hardly any hands went up. And then you asked the women, would you like your husbands to? All the women's hands went up.
That's strategy.
So then you got it, you know, we met in your office, and you I think we had 5 books, so it was a,
Yeah, we did some reading.
you led us into it with book studies, and then you had, I think for at least a year, these every other week sessions on men's issues, and the men's group continues to this day.
I'm very thrilled by that. What else does anybody do? Yep,
Well, it was the decade that I began to connect to the church.
okay.
I had been sort of a marginal member, and so it was really the time that I got pulled in. And I remember you asked me to run the pledge campaign.
Woo!
Anyway, I said yes, I did it. We're still afloat, but just by the skin of our teeth. And I do remember some of the sermons that you gave, as Hal did, and one of them was on Viktor Frankl and his, what did you call it, his 7th freedom. Because I was having a really nice life and everything was under control. And you were saying that when everything gets out of control, you have one more freedom, and that is how your attitude.
Are you going to respond?
And I'm thinking, I have a pretty nice life, I don't need to know this. And then I thought, you know what, I better listen, because it's not going to be like this forever.
Right.
And sure enough, it's a useful, very useful thing to have in my toolkit of coping skills.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that you are looking at the co-chair of the stewardship committee at First Parish in Raleigh. It's been a very sobering experience. The ministers are kind of floating up around here, you know, stewardship, big concepts, you know, generosity and all that. And the folks running the campaign, they're down in the nitty-gritty. Organizing the people, putting the packets together, getting the schedule together, recruiting 40 stewards, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay. That's a real world. Thank you. And thank you to anybody who led a stewardship campaign.
And many of us have.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
And 2 things that I remember is when you did your sermon, when you first came and I joined.
nice.
And second thing is I'm glad that it's now the Bill Gardiner Cleaning Committee. When it comes back.
There you go. There's a communication, right? Here's an old, I'm going to pass this around.
That story?
That's when I had my Prince Valiant.
That's what I'm saying. I remember the Sunday that you came, after changing your hair.
Yes.
His eyes up here. His eyes up here. We can never see his eyes.
Yeah, and you said, now everybody talk about it now, and I don't want to talk about it again.
That was a shock.
Real world. Yeah.
I had actually first heard about you as a youth advisor at a con that took place at the church where I was the interim minister.
Oh, wow.
And so I stayed overnight, and on Sunday morning, the kids said, "Oh, we have to do our Bill Gardiner Memorial." So the kids reenacted apparently a scene that took place here while you were the minister. And this kid was just like, "You have to clean this up, what is this?" And flipping chairs over. And the moral of that vignette was we should clean this church up. So you
See how the story is
right.
One of it is, he looked at me and I was trying to say, "Come on, kids, let's just clean up." When he walked in, boy,
church when members.
their eyes.
One of the things I remember about USG under your leadership, Bill, was we as a congregation became more connected to the interfaith movement, neighborhood interfaith movement. And you were president for a good period of time of the board, and it was a really good period of being out there with others around social justice. And that's my phone, I'm sorry.
So I have wonderful memories of the Northwest Interfaith Movement and the relationships and the connections and the ministry there. It was very sad for me to hear that they had, closed down.
Yeah.
Because when I was here, it was such a vital presence.
My daughter Allison loved you. Do you remember Allison?
I certainly.
She just loved you, and I remember her sitting on your lap at some event upstairs. And she lives in North Carolina now,
Nice.
where she lived since we moved down there. And that's her home. We see her at Christmas or
Wonderful.
whenever. Michelle brought her up here at Christmas so that we could all be together.
Fantastic.
Yes. So, but that was important about how she felt about you. Bill?
I couldn't tell. Okay, this is just, this was back, well, you were here, you had been here for a while, long enough so that I knew Peggy well enough, and it was Susan B. Anthony's birthday, and we thought that there should be a little bit of acknowledgement of this woman in church, because at that time, it was easier to pick a holiday or special day and, something went around. So Peggy and I decided that Susan B. Anthony would come to the service. And so Peggy was my co-conspirator. And we got talking about what we would do, and I said, oh, golly, you think it's going to upset him, or will that be a bad thing to do, Peggy? She said, if it is, it's a crock. And so I came up and interrupted the service as Susan B. Anthony and gave you a Susan B. Anthony doll. And you were very gracious.
When we used to go to Massachusetts, there's a false Massachusetts.
Boston, okay.
Where the college was, and the other is Massachusetts. There's Springfield, Massachusetts.
Springfield is a little bit down the road. Yeah.
And there's a president living in Massachusetts, Mr. Kennedy.
Kennedy, oh yes, he came out of Massachusetts. Fantastic.
Okay, well, I have to tell you, Bill, that being able to come to some of your sermons was the final linchpin in a chain of me moving away from the church I was raised in and becoming an active Unitarian.
Nice.
I had had a rather startling experience with a Methodist minister telling him excitedly about the yoga class I was going to, and he's saying very seriously to me, Elaine, be very careful. Your teacher is going to want to make you worship him. And this was such a misunderstanding of Indian culture and teacher-student relations therein, and it just floored me. And I stopped going to that church, and I started thinking, but I really would like to be in a church community. And I read this book called Behind the Steps of God. It had been put out by Beacon Press. Didn't know who Beacon Press was at that point. I thought, gee, I'd like to know where this woman goes to church. And I looked at her bio. She was from Boston. Oh, of course, she's a Unitarian. So I came to this church in January. I think it was 1984. And you were doing a series of sermons about what you really felt about the different religions of the world, which is a little potentially dicey thing to do from a pulpit. And I came and I listened and I thought, this guy has some brains going on here. And I was really pleased with that, so I kept coming back, and eventually, not too long after that, signed the book and became a member. And your entire time here, while I was first unmarried and then as a very newly married woman, you were so intensely supportive of the women in this congregation. Not only not freaking out because Susan B. came to church that time, but also just, telling Sarah that she should head the pledge drive, telling me I make a really good, what did we call it then? Not worship arts, but, you know, the head of that committee. Really supporting a lot of what individual women did in a very quiet way, and in not a forceful, pushy way, but where you knew you had support. And I just really, really, really appreciate that. Also, Jim has some great memories about our wedding, which we absolutely loved doing with you. And
we got a
it's so
picture,
much fun.
right?
Yeah.
We're adding to the picture.
They have.
I think I gave it back to you.
Yeah, you have the picture.
The signs of the nuclear-free zone stayed up for decades.
Yes, right. I don't know, does anybody know what it took us to get those Trident missiles out of the steeple?
Yeah.
The side missiles that were
They're
down.
still down in the basement, yeah.
It was a lot of hard work getting those out of there.
My sister-in-law always thought that meant we didn't nuke anything, and
There you go. So, I do want to come back around that because someone mentioned Reagan earlier, and you know, I'm basically an organizer, and I was looking for my organizing moment, and Reagan was talking about winning a nuclear war. So, remember that?
yes, vividly.
And I thought, this is my moment. This is something I can preach on. And yeah, a lot, even the conservatives who were in the church said, yeah, that's not a good idea. I understand that. So we did go forward and we organized the Unitarian Universalist Peace Fellowship of the Delaware Valley. So it included members here in the church, but it also had other UUs from some of the other congregations. And we did a lot of anti-nuclear stuff. The interesting thing about that is that there was some 80 to 100 different anti-nuke groups in the city of Philadelphia at that time.
Yeah.
And you may remember a couple of times a year where those groups would get together. And those would be amazing meetings of passionate, moral people, you know, a different vision for our future. So that was powerful.
Who's the minister that came out of the church?
Steve Schick?
Steve Schick. Yeah.
Steve Schick, who I see on a regular basis now. He lives near me. So I wanted to say a little bit about the context of our ministry here. And I wanted to start off by noting this handout that is sporting around these tables. And I've been going through 50 years worth of papers. And whoa, I found this treasure. This is notes from the sermon, which was my second candidating sermon. This was in my file. But what was important about it? What was important about it is this document was created during the week that I candidated here with a gathering of the members and the leadership of the congregation in which we laid out what were the core issues in the life of the congregation. And I'm underlining because whatever I did here was always in collaboration. And it was always in a process of our reaching shared understanding together. This document was a result of that process. And the significance of the document to me is these are the things that we worked on for the next 10 years. Okay? These are the issues that are written down here that we wrestled with and grappled with and worked on together to try to move in some new directions. So this came out of our collaborative working together leadership process. And I think, as we were looking at this the other day, a lot of the issues are still in play, right? Because, you know, the building is still here, this beautiful, wonderful building, which is a challenge to manage and keep up and keep going. And by the way, it's just fantastic to come back here and see the beauty of the space. You all are doing a fantastic job with this. And somebody finally put in some lights in this room. So we can see one another. Who did that? Congratulations.
Got rid of the black ceiling.
This would be a nice
So that was great. So, what were some of the key things? Obviously, the building thing. We sold the property next door and used those resources to refurbish the Sullivan Wing. And, you know,
The first time.
consolidated, that's right. And better management of our fiscal resources, et cetera, et cetera. Then we could put more money into programming. And we expanded staff. We had Marguerite come in. And also the staff that we had here. Marguerite, Joe Chapline, Mark is still here. Ministers come and go, but Mark stays forever. Ellen Butler, Joe Henry, Don Black. Yeah. So, wow. So, the building, the growth, fundraising, trying to ramp that up a little bit. We had a consultant that we brought in to work with the congregation on growth issues, because growth is a mindset, etc. So all those pieces. Now, it's important to remember that when I came here, half of the members were over 65 in age. Of that particular group, half of them were over 85. I'm giving you facts now. You may remember that we did a piece where we honored the 50-year members, and there were like 45 of them.
Yes, yes.
Okay?
Healthy people.
So the challenge was to minister to, this was the heart of the church, right? These were the long distance runners, the people who had, out of love, had been the core of this place. And I made hundreds of pastoral calls. Hundreds. To homes, nursing homes, and so on. These were amazing people. Yes. They had grown up on farms before electricity and before indoor plumbing. They had come into the cities. They'd gone through 2 world wars. They'd gone through the Depression. They'd gone through their family lives. They were living history, and it was just incredible meeting. Many of them, dozens of them, I buried. So pastoral calls and funerals. That was huge. So that was one contingent. Then there were the core leaders of the church who were running the institution. We had this fantastic core of dedicated, talented, hard-working, visionary leaders. And so working with them. And you may remember the fall activities that we had where I had 15 or 20 different groups who were responsible for leadership of the church. It might have been the membership committee, the RE committee, fundraising, etc. And I would set up these appointments on Saturdays. And people would come in and we'd do a review. What's going on in your area? What did we accomplish last year? What do we want to try to do next year? How can I support you, etc., etc. Launch them off for the year. So that was a whole piece of institutional and leadership development and leadership support that was central at that point. And then the third part of it was the new people coming in. Many from you in this room today, who aren't looking so new anymore. But now you're the long time. Didn't you tell me 50 years?
Huh?
Yeah, see? So, now you're the folks who have been here and are the institution, carrying the wealth of the institution and keeping it going forward. Congratulations. So, as ministerial staff, we were working with these 3 different groups, right? And trying to keep them working together. It was challenging. The most difficult situation I faced here in the church was the issue around crying babies. Hey now. I remember being in a meeting, and as I think back there, I should have never been there as a male, because this was a conversation between this 2 generation of women, and the older generation saying, how could you even think about bringing your child into the church? I used to keep my child at home, and it wouldn't even bring them to the church. And you can imagine what the younger generation of women were saying to them. And it was intense.
Yes.
It was very intense, and it was about female identity and being a mother and what's involved in the changing world and all of these pieces, right? But it was a very intense conflict. So one of the other things I want to mention, because it has to do with...
We don't have crying babies anymore.
Yes, we do.
Is that somebody who doesn't go to church?
One more piece was the discussion we had here about services of union. Okay, could we do services of union for BGLT people in the sanctuary? And this was before welcoming congregation.
Yeah.
This was before there was open discussion in the movement. And you may remember, I took the position, I'm going to do these services.
Right. You said we could talk about it, but you were going to do it anyway.
I can do this. I'm going to do the services.
Yes, you said. Yeah.
And I can do them in 1,000 different venues. But it's your sanctuary, and you need to decide if I can do them there. And that's what the discussion was. Over 2 years. And you remember we had all of those discussions on Sunday morning before the worship services. Now here's the amazing thing that I tell people across the region. This is indicative of something. We had gay and lesbian Unitarian Universalists who came from other congregations to share their experience of being Unitarian Universalists and being gay or lesbian. And they were not out in the churches that they came from. They were not out in the churches they came from. And I can't remember any of our folks being out either, because it wasn't safe to be out. You know? So we had this amazing 2-year process, and we were all in a big learning process. I was learning as much as anybody was about these issues that were so core. And I know you did more work on that with the Welcoming Congregation program to deepen the understanding. But I remember the culmination of that, we had a congregational meeting. And in contrast to the congregational meeting where I was called to be your minister, and somebody was hungry and came up and closed down discussion, and they had this vote that never should have happened. We set aside 1 whole hour for discussion and said we will not have a vote until we've had at least 1 hour of discussion. And the members of this church stood up, many, many voices, and they talked about what they had learned and what was important and what their perspective was and where they were with this. And there were members who stood up and said they opposed this because of their love of the church, and that was powerful to me. It was powerful to me that our environment was so open and inclusive that anybody could get up and say their point of view, and that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And then the vote came, I think it was 95-5 in favor.
Bill, when do you think that was? What year was the vote, do you think?
It was 86.
86.
So, that was before Welcome to Congregation. And what I want to share with you today is that that's something that we achieved together. That's something that we achieved together. And it happened because there's a loving congregation here that was really holding people in respect and in regard, and we use good process. Okay? So that's what helped to make that. So, let me see if you have any questions about it. Yeah.
Well, I want to reflect on that because our youngest son is gay, and he grew up in Mount Airy, he grew up in this community, and he's got his problems, but he never recognized or understood that being gay was anything other than normal. Nice. So part of that was the process that you've gone through, I'm sure.
Yes.
So, on that journey, I am the vice chair of the Mystic LGBTQ Youth Support Network in Arlington, Massachusetts. And we are running a drop-in center on Friday nights for LGBTQ youth, where they can have a safe place to meet and share community and form community and so forth. So I'm still very engaged with that community and engaged in that marvelous work and meeting these young people. It's just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Any other questions?
Not a question, but a comment on the ministry. When Prince Valiant came, you're one a great speaker. I remember an early service where they had the kids up there, and you were telling them about the UN office, and telling them stuff that even put the rest of the congregation to sleep. Over the years, you became, and part of it, you went to, was it the Lutheran Seminary? I mean, over the years, you got so much better. By the end of the 80s, you were going up and down the aisles, and yeah, terrific. And I thought it was such a shame that you reached your peak as a preacher that you stopped.
I'm not preaching anymore. In fact, they called me out of retirement for 2 years because I've given up preaching. That's another story. I'm organizing. What I'm not talking about, I'm doing it. You got the difference on me? And if it will serve my organizing, I'll go out and preach. But one of the things that happened around that, and there's a whole story about how I changed my preaching style, etc., is that really equipped me when I started working in the country. Because I was doing all of these things with people and groups and so forth, and it was all without notes, right? Running trainings and events and preaching. I was doing 2.5-day workshops, which would be the equivalent of doing 20 sermons like that. So it really, the whole process of learning how to do it really empowered me to be a much more effective person in my role of national setting.
I was surprised when you said the most challenging thing was crying babies. Because what I remember was when the ushers became bisexual. In other words, we had women and men. Cheater Bonanno showed up one day in a pantsuit
Oh my God.
instead of a skirt,
Uh-oh.
which threw the older ushers who've done it for years into apoplectic. And it was a huge issue because you had both sides at the intensity of, I'm going to quit the church.
It wasn't just a pantsuit, it was a woman's tux.
A woman's what?
Tux, a tuxedo. It was, and it had a little bow tie and the whole bit. It was lovely.
At any rate, you mediated that and got it discussed again. You got people involved in processing and more conscious of what's going on. And Bob LeMay accepted it. And now we have more female ushers almost than men.
Try to strike it there.
Yeah. Who wear pants.
What, some of the things you've reflected on, the challenges that the minister had to come in on and deal with. I was reflecting back on the search committee, and he's the only one here, Tom Shoemaker. And we put you through a very rough time. I think we're afraid we chase you away, but you obviously had the guts to face the challenges, because the challenges were many, including a congregation that didn't trust the minister.
Oh yes, there was that issue, wasn't there?
In fact, we didn't want you to preach more than 2 Sundays a month.
Right.
It was a big issue. But you handled us well and made the right choice.
I've always felt that.
Pardon?
I've always felt that.
Yeah.
And I felt called here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Bill, Bill, you're in Bill.
So, just as, you know, in the history, right, there have been issues with the ministers. Right? And you had a couple of difficult experiences before I came. So, it was a little bit of chutzpah to come here. But I felt the love. I saw the love. And the committee that was put together, Tom and Mark, Bill Delamar, Elizabeth Madeira, Irene Magaziner, the funny guy who was the newspaper, Al Ehrlich. Remember Al Ehrlich's sense of humor? Must have me laughing the whole week I was here. That was a great group.
How about the board?
She was not on the committee. She was. I saw a lot of potential here and a lot of opportunity. And actually, it looked like a very inviting place to come to. It turned out that way.
And for us, we're glad you took a chance on that.
Mount Airy is the favorite place we've ever lived.
And I miss Tom doing gardens.
Well, I know.
I remember one Sunday morning, you and I were working in your garden, and you had the radio on, and people from the church
We were
across
chopping
the
the
street
tree
came over
down.
and complained.
From Summit, the people from the Summit.
We still have Tom Schoonmaker's tomato cages.
Well, can I say a couple things on this point about the minister and the congregation? So Bill and I continue to develop interactions and relationship, especially at General Assembly. At times we'd sit in the hallway for a long period of time. Well, anyway, I just continue to share with him how I always saw it as be such a solid, healthy, strong decade of the church that had fired 2 ministers shortly before he was here. And how important that was. And then that set the table for Nina to have a solid ministry and as a female, which is a big deal. And I don't know if Peggy's heard me say this, but I always say that of all the approval ratings historically of the ministers, Peggy Gardiner has the highest. Approval rating.
Absolutely.
Sure, just stating the facts.
I just like that Peggy really did minister to a lot of us in her way. And I remember one time you were trying to find somebody to teach AppleWorks at Penn State OGOTS, and you asked me if I could do it, and I said, no, I can't do that. And you said to me, if they pay you, can you do it? All right, yes, I can do it. That was a good ministry.
My dad is a minister,
Yeah.
like pastoral care.
Okay.
But my mother did all that. She was the other side of it, you know. She did all kinds of things. And she promoted, she didn't get paid for anything until she gave up and told them she had to get paid for what she was doing. Because she used to type all my dad's sermons on Sunday afternoon from a tape, because he would get promoted in the newspaper the next day, and he was very controversial.
Yo-yo.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes, things are interesting. In the ministry. Yes.
So any last words before we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you for coming back.
Well,
as the saying goes, we'll see you in church.
That's right.
Well, I want to thank you for coming back. I want to thank you for coming to us in the first place. You made a potentially strong church into a strong church. You were sorely needed when you came. And I had just come before you came, and I was going through all kinds of things, like Jealous was like a father figure to me, and then he gave us a hellfire.
He's coming back.
Even as I say, he was giving a hellfire and damnation sermon the next day, and I'm going, what's going on here? And then I asked for some feedback or talk back, and he said yes, and then when we got there, he said, but I'm not doing this every Sunday, you know. And I'm going back and forth about what, and then you came and you facilitated a meeting so that everybody got heard, and for the first time I had some hope. And you were a fine, fine minister for this church.
Thank you.
I always appreciated that.
Lord, and here in place in Massachusetts.